This has been fascinating. As we've said right at the beginning, you're starting a podcast slash vidcast slash, I'm not quite sure what the format is, what the name for the format is, but of Tokyo the Five Rings, which is currently on YouTube, I believe.
Yes, we have the first episode out on the Courtgames podcast YouTube page.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about that first episode.
So that first episode was exploring the creation myth of both L5R and, to a lesser extent, Japanese mythology, and just trying to explore the differences and explain what that kind of means by having those differences.
And how would people get in touch with you if they wanted to reach out to you and ask more stuff?
So you can find me typically on Discord. I am Orida Kazuhito. I'm using that name for a very specific reason. Orida is the family name of the minor clan that I created, specifically trying to design ways of really showing how you can combine traditional Japanese mythology with L5R in an inclusive and positive way.
Are there changes you'd like to make if you could?
Yes. One of the big ones would be giving fictional names to all of the kami. So this is something I've gone back and forth on a few times. I've been like, maybe just making so there's no fictional names and it's all real world kami, and then you really just emphasize what those kami are about, and then you can show, respect and stuff to it. But the more I think about it, the more I like, it's so disconnected from Japan that it's hard to do that in a respectful way. Because otherwise you're basically having to just completely take the Nihon Shoki and the Kojiki and just put that into Rokugan, but it doesn't fit. It doesn't work that way. So my thought process is more of just changing the names of all the real world kami to fictional kami. It's not like they don't have fictional kami. Every single one of the founding kami for the Great Clans are fictional. Nantangu is fictional. So they can do it, but they've done this halfway thing, which I don't feel jives with what they're really trying to accomplish. So that's one thing I would definitely change. Another one would actually be the removal of the caste system.
Ooh.
Yeah, so this one comes down to the fact that the caste system was something that was instituted during the Tokugawa period. I get that that's part of the inspiration for L5R, but the caste system leaves a lot of bad taste in people's mouth because there are issues still related to that here in Japan.
Yes. Especially right down the lower end, yeah.
Exactly.
The historical caste system, and that is still ongoing, and there's a lot of discrimination still going with that, even now.
Yes, it's pretty bad in that regard. And the fact that they used the same terms that were used for that caste system and those lower castes, which has a really negative connotation in Japan, causes some tension, because it's, wow, do they know what that means? Like, they do realize that's bad, right? That's a lot of the stuff I get from out here. Is like, you really shouldn't be saying that. Like, saying that out loud in Japan now is really disrespectful. The same with the word gaijin. It's not really used in Japan anymore because it has such a negative connotation. The word used is gaikokujin, which is basically a person from a foreign country.
Yeah, as opposed to an outside person, which is what gaijin is. Because the implication is you're outside of everything, whereas a gaikokujin is rather more outside of this particular country.
Exactly. So those would be my two biggest changes that I want to do for L5R.
I've another option for the kami names. I've heard it, like, given that we so often just say Lady Sun, Lord Moon, just keep doing that. You don't even need to give them Japanese sounding names.
Yeah, just completely cut the names entirely out that they have. There's still a whole bunch you have to change, like the 7 fortunes, which are based off of the 7 lucky gods of Japan. That's very distinctively Japanese. Those are Japanese names for 3 Indian, 3 Chinese, and 1 Japanese kami.
Anything that you think that we could be using from Japanese culture that we're not at the moment?
So I would like to see more about Matsuri, to be honest. Matsuri and rituals are exceedingly important in traditional Japanese culture. I don't know if you've heard of Golden Week in Japan. Golden Week is basically like 5 holidays in a row where everyone gets the time off. And everyone goes on vacation, they go visit family and things like that. It's very important. But the one I want to bring attention to is Silver Week, which literally just happened this last weekend. And these happen on the equinox. So during this time period, you go to your family's grave and you clean it and redo the offerings of the grave and things like that. I feel like that depth is missing to an extent from L5R. I know it's really hard to get that same level of depth in a fictional setting, but it'd be very interesting to see this depth being added more and more. With each of the books that are added, there's definitely more depth being added, which is great. But Matsuri in general are just such an integral part. Every shrine has their own Matsuri. There are Matsuri that are shared between a whole bunch of shrines, such as New Year being exceedingly important. You go to the shrine on New Year's and you do that for, one of the main reasons is creating a good first impression to the kami. And you get purified during that. There's another one during summer where there's a huge purification event. So for Matsuri, these things are important. Other ones I'd like to see would be harai, which is purification rites that are a little different than how they're shown in L5R. These are literally going to rivers and to the ocean and to waterfalls and basically bathing in them and purifying yourself through special clothing and being purified from any kagare, which is like ritual or spiritual impurity that you accrue just through living your life. In a society that's supposed to be very focused on purification to an extent from the writings and what have been shown, this is something that's missing a little bit. Again, it's little things like this that would add a lot of depth. We don't really see the importance of rivers in a spiritual sense. We see the importance of hot springs and cleanliness that way. But I feel like we're missing the other part of the equation. So I'd like to see that. Forest bathing is another thing that happens out here in Japan, where people will just go to the forest and just feel that the green of nature and really reconnect with that. And L5R, the forests are seen as almost entirely primordially evil. So you miss out on that aspect. I would like to see less evil forests and more forests where people can just enjoy themselves a little bit. I'm not saying all forests suddenly be made nice. Show that there's this respect. The other thing is actually wolves. So in Japan, wolves are seen as a beneficial thing. They are not seen as bad. They're not seen as negative. This derives from the fact that they were not a pastoral society, but completely agrarian. They focused on getting food from the oceans and from rice paddies. And their biggest threats were things like wild boar and deer. Wolves weren't hunting their cows because they didn't have cattle. But they kept these animals from destroying their fields. In L5R, you have a very similar setup where you're not supposed to be eating meat from the world because that's considered polluted and bad. You get fish, and you get rice, and you get barley, and you get other things like that you're supposed to be eating in general. Unless you're the Dragon Clan, then you get,
mountain tuna.
Mountain tuna, exactly. So, in general, though, you don't hear things about herding and grazing animals. So, the idea of wolves being a negative in L5R always felt weird to me, because that's how they were viewed in the previous iteration. I haven't really seen much about wolves in the current version, but I'd like to see the positive aspects of that brought into the game.
That's, again, another perspective I hadn't seen.
All right. We are happy to talk to you, give our love to everybody out there. But that's it for us this week.
It's been fun. Thank you for having me on the show.